don't think the same way that I do, and that if we all just looked out for each other, we would be okay. Um, and and so knowing right now of how um, scared and fragile our world is, um, it's hard to imagine that right now. Honestly, that like I'm gonna do my best to keep living into the baptismal covenant and um, and giving where and when I can. Um, but it's honestly just really difficult to imagine that other people will do the same.
I would like to think, particularly here in Virginia, we've had good leadership, I think, from our governor. I would like to think that the people who fuss about wearing masks are in the minority. They're just loud. I don't know if I'm deluding myself. And I just have to remember that wearing a mask is as though I were infected. And so that's how I hold someone else in common, I would guess. Um, I have to say, I miss these people in my life that I don't even know, that I used to love. You know, you go to the store, I sort of engaged with people. Um, they're just always people around you, and now they're not. And I really miss that. And that I didn't realize how isolated we really are, because I'm there're just not many people around. And that breaks my heart. It really does. It makes it harder to think that there's a future um, after or during this virus.
I've been impressed by the vision of community that we get from the healthcare workers. I've read so many posts from doctors and nurses who say, you know, they want people to be responsible in their lives so that more people aren't sick. But they also seem to acknowledge that this is what they signed up for. Like, they show up for work every day, they go into these terrible environments and see all the suffering and death, and they don't seem to complain on that level for that. And so it makes me think about the sermon and about the scripture here, because it seems like the healthcare folks are taking care of everybody, regardless of background. And they're doing it very selflessly, it seems to me.
So I have something that I've thought about when we say this word. And if you're not, for those of you who are not talking, go ahead and mute your microphones so that the background noise in your house doesn't make weird squeaky sounds. The word, you know, when we say we have all things in common, that means, you know, we generally say we have it, it's commonly held. But the word common also refers to things that are everyday, ordinary, and not set apart, not holy, maybe even the lowest things. You know, it's common. And I'm thinking about the common things that are becoming holy things. That we are dealing with very everyday, ordinary, day-to-day, concrete, even as we're separated, this is one of these times where just the very simple thing has taken on a whole new meaning. And, you know, a face mask. So I'm going to leave it at that because it adds another dimension to this and in my thinking of this language we use. And there are other words in here that have meaning that may have been signal words to the people who are reading this or hearing this in the first century or second century. So any thoughts about that?
I like the term day by day, as they spent much time together, they ate their food with glad and generous hearts. I love it when I see our gladness and our generosity. I didn't come to First Fruits yesterday. I'll be back next time. But I think that's still just such a wonderful thing to do.
And so yesterday with First Fruits, we collected over 400 pounds of food, which is phenomenal. But the other thing that was really touching was we actually had somebody who found out that we were doing this and showed up looking for food. And so we simply said, okay, what do you need? What do you want? What will you eat? You know, I don't want to give you things that you're going to be like, oh, this is nasty. So we sat and chatted, and she just kind of shopped from the back of my trunk, you know, and the important thing for me was I was able to hear her story of the fact that this is somebody who had her life going on, who was a professional dog walker, who had a lot of clients, whose life was going along just fine, and suddenly everything changed for her. And now she's having to navigate new systems and to figure out how to apply for a small business loan and trying to figure out how she's just going to simply eat. And I just thought about the fact that, you know, here we are trying our best, those of us who are still fortunate enough to have means, to have resources, to still reach out and support those who aren't, or who are in a position now where they just need a little bit more to make it through the day-to-day. And that's what I'm kind of clinging to in my life right now, is that sense that there is still this sense of generosity that's happening. There's a section in Acts, and I can't remember exactly where it is. I think it might be at the end of this chapter. But it talks about a severe famine hitting in the area around Jerusalem and in the Middle East, what we would consider the Middle East. And there is a section that says that I think it's the church in Jerusalem sent food to somebody else to help them out. And it never dawned on me until recently that the people who were sending food were as impacted by the famine as anybody else. And yet they were still giving, they were still reaching out, they were still caring for others, they were still holding their brothers and sisters in common. And so I think that to me is instructive in my life right now as we are going through this, and as I hear reports of other Christians who are really interested in opening up their houses of worship, sometimes in absolute defiance of stay-at-home orders. You know, how is it that we can live in a way that we have God willing, the goodwill of all people as well. Just some more thoughts.
Raise your hand. I also want to add to that. I think it's really good to reach out with the food and our material things, but you know, I've called a couple of friends that live out of state, and we talk about what's going on with them. My family is all out of state, and we're really appreciating each other's phone calls and check-ins. It's almost gotten to be part of the essential every couple of days to make sure we're all okay. And I noticed just in our neighborhood in Churchill, when you are outside on your porch or something like that and people walk by, everyone is speaking and just raising their hand, and they're very mindful of the distance and their mask. So that's been a good thing to see and experience. But just checking in on people, some of my older friends who don't get out much anyway, they're really happy to have the phone call and a good long discussion. And personally, it's really nice just to slow down so you can smell the roses and notice the beauty around you, and then not always get hooked on the news, because you got to balance that out with God's beauty. It is spring, and the goodness of technology to be able to see people like you all and our families and friends. It's a good thing to stay in touch with everybody in common.
To kind of make a long story short, I serve on a board of a micro lending organization that helps women in Kenya, Ghana, and a portion of South Africa begin their own businesses and so forth. And this section of Kenya that I was contacted about, they are practicing social distancing, of course, with a pretty strong hand. And the woman that we know in that area was talking about the children in the village near her were so hungry. She knows she's going to soon see starvation. And make an even longer story short, we were able to get some funds to her. And I think the thing that occurred to me, $10 in America means a whole lot different in another country. And sometimes how you can underestimate a minor change in behavior and turn that into giving. I remember telling some kids once, do you realize if you go to Starbucks only once a month, you could actually contribute to somebody's well-being in another country? And I remember them saying, it never occurred to me. I said, well, with exchange of currency, it can make a huge difference for people. So the funny thing that happened, this friend of mine who readily states her age, so that's why I'm telling you, she's 85. She called me to see if I needed her. And the thing that really touched my heart about it, I knew if I had said yes, she would have been here. So sometimes we have those moments where somebody says, I love you, through gestures like this, what Brenda was talking about, and it can be so life-changing. So please don't underestimate that either.
Dorothy, as you were talking, I was looking at this passage. I was thinking about awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. And then you hear they would sell their possessions and goods. They would break bread, spend time together, eat food. Those are the signs and wonders. That connection was made. So
yes, selflessness would require that kind of response because it is that unique.
So what are the signs and wonders? That's,
So let me ask a different question. If we are the inheritors of this first century Christian church, how do you see us holding all things in common? How do you see us being together? How do you see us in, both before and after pandemic, if you will, kind of being in the midst of these wonders and signs that are still occurring in the world around us? Emily, Dorothy, and I were having a conversation earlier this week about it almost seems like there are different reasons why people were attracted to this original community. And it seems like maybe the first thing that brought them in was the wonders and signs. But then there were other things. There was fellowship, there was breaking of bread, there was prayers, there was the apostles' teachings, there was community. And not only was it community, but it was going out into the world around them. And I think about St. John's and the vast reasons why people come and the vast reasons why people stay. So thinking about this passage, how do you see this in our community today?
So what, David, what I think of when I first read the passage, I can get caught up in the word things, and it takes me down a path of thinking about tangible things and possessions. But as I read it and as we talk about it, what comes up is about connection, or the primary things of the prayers and the fellowship and the breaking of the bread, which is about people and connection. And so it's helpful for me to go back to the scripture and stay away from the things, and focus on the people and the connection. And then my interpretation is about holding each other in common. And that quickly takes me to a message of inclusion and regarding my brothers and sisters. And that takes me to doing that both pre-pandemic and during and after. It's kind of this idealized response of, it's actually an opportunity to give us a really good reminder, at least for me, of what's really good values and behavior and mindset for me to have always. And if I keep that mindset that we are all in common, I am my brother and sister's keeper and they are mine, then that serves me well when times are tough. And I think that's what we often see. When times get really, really tough, we often see generosity of spirit really highlighted. And so I keep that in mind as I think about moving forward. And actually, when I think about things that perturb me or things that from my perspective would be a selfish behavior. So you mentioned what in my view would be a premature opening up of churches when I heard was, I think this was in Oklahoma, a premature opening of a church, and they anticipate that maybe 15 to 20% of their congregation is going to come. I just have to really redirect myself in another direction that takes me down a different path, and do something counter that, but very positive and in keeping with the scripture, and not go that place. It's not in keeping with keeping each other in common, although I suspect that congregation and that pastor thinks that might be what's happening.
Catherine, your comment is leading me to something that I had focused on in another several years ago about this passage. And this word fellowship, we hear it, but the Greek word is koinonia. And it's also koine, which is also common. So the word koine appears numerous times in this passage and throughout. And koinonia, and when I was taking Greek, I had to do a word study on that word. In the common understanding of koinonia in the Greco-Roman culture, it was a word used for the marital relationship. It was the most intimate form of communion possible. So when we hear, let's have a fellowship hour, the word that underlies that was very intimate. And so when you got that kiss of peace, it was basically, as you said, you are a part of me. We are a part of one another. And I think that kind of intimacy can be uncomfortable, and it's easier to say fellowship, but when you go down deep there, so that's why, when I think about, and I listen to our bishop say that in the Episcopal Church and in churches in general, even though we have a relatively young congregation at St. John's now, the average age is above 60. So if you are a part of me, what does it mean when I open the door, because we can, we will, to doing things that are going to put us at risk. And so I'll stop there. I just wanted to mention that. Your comment spurred on this connection for me.
Well, I'll add this comment because I think I've been thinking about this, and it may be what we're possibly dancing around. But as we move forward, I think we're going to be stepping into another area of inclusion and acceptance. And part of that, there are all these kind of buzzwords that gender, race, class, but without having to think about it, I think we need to think about fear. Like my fear and someone else's fear is different, but it needs to be regarded. That whatever that fear is needs to be regarded, because it's also is defined by where I or that other person is right now in their life, what their life experience has been, what they might know about what their future holds. And there's so many other things about the other that I don't know about their past, about their present, and about what they anticipate for their future. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to hold each other in the fullness of the other without knowing about it. And just expand that and realize that we're going to need to expand ourselves in order to have that inclusion. And it might not make sense to us. And I think that's part of what love is. Like, we love even when it doesn't make, I love Brenda even when it doesn't make sense to me. It's just the way it works. I'll sign off now.
Good morning. I had to go walk for my back for a moment, but before I left, I wanted to say something about gratitude. Susan and I both are so grateful first for each other, and then for our life. Everything around us seems to be just about perfect. We are not rich, but we don't have any needs. We have some wants on occasion, but no real needs. We sit on the balcony and look at our willow oak in front of the building and are so grateful for that willow oak and the balcony. So it's just a matter of us being comfortable in our lives. We just have such a darn good time together.
You have to go over there.
It's a gift to all of us. In this video that I saw about different pastors and Zoom, there were a lot of funny things, but one was how to fortify ourselves. And of course, this pastor concluded his Zoom meeting and he picked up a martini. Didn't realize everybody was still on. But one of the things I thought about that was, in all this that we're considering, and how do we be community, how do we fortify ourselves? And we're given these practices: teaching, fellowship, breaking of the bread, and prayers. Those are the things that sustained and nourished. And look, we've got a little one over there. So what you just shared was part of what fortifies me. But what fortifies us now? Think about what we do every Sunday, because every Sunday we do the teaching, the readings from Scripture. We have the fellowship, the communion, koinonia. We have the breaking of the bread and the prayers. How does that feel right now? And look, we have the love of children.
I think your Sunday services are very fortifying in the music. We watch it diligently, and we even have our own form of communion here at home because it's important. But so you all in common fortify us, that we can see you and be a part of that, and appreciate all the people that participate. EFM on Monday nights with Jane and David and others, that's fortifying as well. And we always take a little time to check in. But I want to switch just a little bit. I mean, I try to watch the news to stay informed so that I don't get distance from the suffering that's out there that I'm not experiencing directly. And I am grateful for that, and for family and friends. So you have that on that level, the numbers, the governors, what they say, what they do, what the different states do. That sort of pulls me together, because I know what's going on in common on a large scale. But sometimes the common experience on the day-to-day living, other than, say, prayer and the worship and whatever, I find humor in, because I've never talked about toilet paper so much in my life, or had other people bring it up. And I have friends in a lot of different states, and that whole thing started, that was the first thing on their mouth and lips. And my sister would send me a funny cartoon every now and then about it in Florida. And then it was food. And, now we're all worried about the food chain and meat. So I think that brings everybody to a common spot. And as noted, haircuts and pedicures. I hear a lot about that. And I'm not liking it. I've ordered scissors and another kit. So I may look different next time you see me, or no hair at all because I screwed up. But I think there's a lot of levels of commonality. And then, part of that, what we're doing as a group, the food bank, I think that's important. And neighbor to neighbor, person to person, that I think all of that has changed for a lot of people. So I guess I'm just saying there's levels of common good and conversation. And I think some days it's really hard to hold all of that and ground yourself. And I think that's when I go to the prayer books, in the Bible. I have that 23rd Psalm memorized. My grandmother made me memorize that years ago. But things like that are helpful. Or just to say grace at dinner when we sit down. That's a centering thing. So, but we are grateful for you, Emily, and Dorothy, and David, and all the members of our church that we get to see. It just brings a lot of joy. And that brings us right back down to a good spot. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Thank you, Brenda. I want to say that when I tune into a service, I don't realize how hungry I've been for it until the music starts and I kind of settle down. Normally in going to church, you get up, you get dressed, you're kind of a rush to get out the door and get somewhere. But this way, I just kind of feel it wrap me up. And it's just such a visceral thing that nourishes me, fortifies me.
I am actually fortified through silence and quiet. And believe it or not, for me, I still don't have enough, but that's another story. But one of the things that I'm finding in my time, when every now and then my prayer is, Lord, what do you want me to pray today? Every time I sit with that, I'm praying differently. I'm praying for people with a freshness. I'm praying with a confidence that the prayer does make a difference. So it is as if this time is being used to remind me of how vast and awesome our world really is. When I think of the fact that my parents are no longer here and I go through seasons of really missing them, what I'm reminded of is the responsibility of a parent. So I find myself praying for parents rather than sitting in my own, oh, I miss them thing. So I can sense the Spirit challenging me to a growth that I don't know I would have experienced otherwise. I wouldn't have given much thought to it. But when I am challenged or got a burden or something really on me, then I ask for new ways to pray about it or different ways to pray. And what I'm finding is by doing so, I'm being changed. So it seems as if the season of this social distancing is actually giving me the ability to be more socially present than I usually am. And that for me, my mother would be shouting and, oh my God, she realizes there's another human being, you know. My mother would have a fit, but it's changing me in that way. So when I look at the phrase toward the end of this passage and having the goodwill of all people, I'm finding God has challenged me to live into what that means. What that means for some people is to pray for their children. What it means for others is to pray for their physical well-being. And then what it means for me is to pray that I not sit on their answer. Perhaps I have their answer in my hand, but I'm so absorbed in myself, it never occurred to me that I can make a difference. So that's how this period of time is changing me and fortifying me. It's drawing me out of myself, and I'm grateful for that, I think, anyway. So far, I'm grateful. So I just wanted to share that.
One of the things that I'm hearing, and also I know I'm living, is this what the goodwill of all people. And then when it comes to our congregation and our shared life and our worship, to think about, you know, as we try to continue offering an opportunity for worship or learning. There's so much that's new. And we have a way of doing things that we always do on Sundays or in our shared life. And is this a time to try a whole bunch of new things? Or is it a time to center down into the things that we're used to as much as we can in order to provide a sense of continuity and familiarity? So when Susan, you sit down and you start hearing the music, or you hear the opening that's so familiar to you, is that my sense is that's giving you a sense of peace. Okay. So I'm in that betwixt and between place, because there's part of what I'm hearing and seeing is this is the time to just open all the doors and try all sorts of new things. On the other hand, how do we restore that sense of identity and belonging and familiarity and keep that going during a time when everything has changed? So there's this tension between doing the things we always do and being open to the new. So I'd love to hear from you about all that. Do you find that the sense of continuity is important? Are you embracing the fresh, the different? Is that more important? I'd love to hear some thoughts about that.
Well, what was helpful for me as you got to the question, Emily, was to have us first ask ourselves about what fortifies us. And I think now it's really helpful for me to be able to think about that and be able to be specific about what things are fortifying. And then I'm more inclined to be able to respond to questions about what to change up and not to change up, because I feel like I'm responding to that from a more informed place. And I don't think I was that aware at the beginning of our forum this morning. So for me, I would suggest what just happened during the forum is to have other people take a chance to think about what really restores, what feeds them, because I don't know how often do we think about that in multiple aspects of our lives, and then from there think about what needs to stay the same or change, because that was really helpful for me. And out of this has come, it's important for me to have the connection. It's important for me to have the opportunity for a deep spiritual moment or connection with the divine, to have community there. But to name and identify those things, I think then informs what activity, and otherwise we can create busyness and we can create lots of newness that can be more stress inducing than helpful, certainly for me. So thank you for, whether that was intended or not, it was very helpful for me. It may be helpful for others.
Can I add something real quickly? Like today, for example, seeing Jim with the headphones and I guess at his own home, and I could hear Denise's voice and I recognized it. That was new. He's usually in a white robe and you see his back, but to see him with the earphones and really singing, and that was cool. That was really nice. But it's also nice to see the stained glass or the front of the church, how you slowly come down on that. That pulls me in, because that makes me feel like I'm going into the church. But every now and then to see those stained glass windows shown really slowly, because I think we take those for granted, and there's a beautiful message and artistry in each one of those, especially when the sun shines through. So I think it's a mix for me. I like the new and I like some of the old. It's all been really good, but the faces are the best.
When Dorothy and David and I were talking about this passage, we were thinking about this idea of, the common good and sharing all things in common, and how that may have been the way things were in those early Christian communities, but Western Christianity really didn't take a liking to that. If we look at the way Christianity evolved in the West and in this country, that would sort of be kind of idealistic, or maybe limited to the monastic communities, but in our, after with the Enlightenment, with the Catholic communal living, it might be okay for Polynesian cultures or whatever, but it's not the way we that's not the way Christianity as we know it evolved. And so we're thinking about this again, but it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And this touches upon what Brenda just said, and Catherine said, did they share all things in common because that was just what you do, that everybody's entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or what was the teaching that all people are children of God? We are all connected, koinonia, we're one. Did that fortification, that then inform how we look at one another when it comes to having all things in common and our shared life? So, and then also having all things in common and our shared life informs how we understand what it means to be children of God. So it's like not one or the other. It's not what comes first, the chicken or the egg. The teaching, the inspiration created a way of behaving, but the way of behaving informed the teaching. It worked back and forth. So, okay, I'll shut up again.
And one more thing, and then I'll shut up. I read Joan Chittister's little message every day, and Mark Nepo, I don't know if you all know him. He has a book out called the Book of Awakening, How to Have the Life You Really Want to Have. And they're just essays and poems. But his theme and her theme are the same, even though they're writing it differently. And it is that concept of one, which I think still means community, that, you have to think of everybody, and we're all in it. I don't know if you've noticed the commercials on TV, they have changed. Mm-hmm. Everybody's putting out a thing saying we're all in this together. Yeah, we're in it, but we're not all having the same, reactions and support and money and food and whatnot. So, but the message out there and Matthew Fox, another good voice out there, and Richard Rohr, they all talk about one, unity, commonality, everybody, everything. So if you're looking for somebody or something to read, those folks are really helpful too, along with the church messages and Emily's essays, which are always awesome. Thank you. I'm done.
David, are you saying something? Unmute yourself.
I was not, actually. I was thinking, but then I stopped.
Say something anyway.
Well, I think, I'm just mindful of the time that we're almost at time. And I know for myself, one of the things that I will be reflecting on and really kind of dwelling on in my own life as we move forward with all of this is, how do we hold things in common, and what are the lessons that we'll learn? How will we be different as a community when we come back together? How is the Spirit still moving and breathing and fortifying us and challenging us and changing us and keeping us right where we are and moving us to new places. How is the Spirit doing that? And how will we be different when we come back? And how will that make St. John's, our community, different as well? And I don't think different is bad different, but how will we be engaging in our faith in a new and different way? Just like that early church was. You know, that early church was kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And they were changing and evolving every day. And how can we carry that same kind of Spirit-filled transformation into our lives and into St. John's when we're back together as well? So I think I'll be spending a lot of time just kind of pondering that as we move through towards Pentecost, when we welcome the birth of the church, wear red, and then as we move past that as well.
Thank you, David. And I love that you mentioned Pentecost, because the Pentecost moment happened before this passage. And one commentary talked about how they grew to 3,000. That was a lot of bread to bake. And an inherently unstable situation. Because when every day a bunch of new people are there or new things are happening, it's a new day. So I appreciate, David, what you said. And also your presence and your thoughtfulness during this time. And wanted to say a few words about next week before we sign off. And I'll hand that to Dorothy. Our speaker, our presenter will be Judge Hannah Locke, who is a long time, not just acquaintance, but colleague that Dorothy is known through her life teaching at St. Catherine's and other things she's been involved in. So Dorothy, why don't you say a few words about Hannah, and then we can sign off with our virtual hug that we give each other, okay?
All right. It's been a couple of years ago. Hannah spoke at a forum at St. Catherine's, and her talk was such a insight into social justice issues until I retained a lot of the talk, so that when we were discussing ethics and so forth for 2020, her name kept coming in my heart. And so I contacted her and she said, yes, she would come. So Hannah is going to be talking with us. She is the first woman appointed as U.S. District Judge in the Richmond Division of the Eastern District of Virginia. And she has served as a U.S. Magistrate Judge since 2005. She's a member of the Virginia and D.C. Bar Associations and of the Fourth Circuit Judicial Conference. She and her husband, Jay, have a son and daughter. Jay teaches English at St. Christopher's School. Their son and daughter graduated from St. Chris and St. Catherine's. And she has an incredible way of dealing with clients, people who are coming before her. And it just opened my eyes to a lot. My own involvement in court in the past has often been with someone accused of something or pleading for mercy on behalf of someone. So I've not really seen it from the judge's point of view. And I really wanted you to have an opportunity to hear her heart about people, ethics, and the responsibility that she has as a district judge. And she was appointed by Obama in 2014 to her present status. So if you will, spread word to people. I think they would really enjoy it. I told her this Zoom format is still unfolding for our church, but she's willing to give it a try. So if you have anyone who you think might be interested in just social justice as a topic from the point of view of a judge, please tune in next week.
Thank you. And I'll add my 2 cents. The first naturalization ceremony that I saw and participated in at St. John's was presided over by Hannah Locke. And it was absolutely one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had. And the way she spoke to those newly inducted citizens was powerful. So she will speak for herself, but I'm so grateful that Dorothy made this connection. And grateful for all of you. Go in peace, as David would say, to love and serve and care for one another. David, want to add to that? And virtual hugs to all, okay? Enjoy this beautiful day, okay? Love you. Bye-bye.